Today, young people are talking about building purpose driven businesses where impact and scalability aren't trade offs.
Lots of creators have been let go because AI can do that job better than a copywriter, is what some of the clients say.
Consumer behavior and preferences are changing. It's the young consumers who are forcing marketeers to say that, guys, if you are not purpose driven, if your brands are not purpose driven, we won't buy you.
If you are advising a young marketer wanting to build a global brand from India, what 2-3 strategic imperatives would you emphasize now, and what pitfalls should they watch out for? Everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Insightful Exchange, a podcast where we dive into everything in marketing from evolution to brand building and beyond. I am Bhavi Doshi, joined by my co host Sandeep Budiraja, and today we're thrilled to have Suvodeep Das with us.
Thank you for taking time out to talk to us. So, would you want to say something about yourself? I know you are the last guy who would want to say, "Oh, I've done this and all," but
Well, I'm Suvo. I'm currently the Global VP Marketing Enablement for Pluxee International based in Paris. Worked in various companies, largely in products and marketing, and more importantly, in global roles for the past 20 plus years. Happy to speak to you guys.
Firstly, it's great to have you with us today. To start with, I would actually start that you've worked across so many markets and seen how marketing is evolving globally, and you have interacted with so many young professionals along the way. So I would actually ask, with that in mind, that what's one thing about today's generation that you feel excites you the most?
What really excites me about the young generation today is something which is very close to my heart, which is what I call bias for action. While traditionally marketeers would take a launch and validate approach, Gen Z would quickly want to challenge all the fundamentals and do a major reshape of business models, taking a level of risk which, when we were young, we perhaps wouldn't. So they're not just reiterating on existing business models, they're fundamentally reimagining how markets should work for people and, most importantly, the planet.
so does it excite you, or is there any other word for this?
It excites me, and for me it's very heartening. It's very heartening because today young people are talking about building purpose driven businesses where impact and scalability aren't trade-offs. We never saw this before, and this gives us a lot of hope for the future about business as well as for the planet.
So, a question actually leading from there. Do you think marketing would change or is already changing to becoming more purposeful? If that's happening, then how does it work for mass markets like Brazil, India, which are very different from the Western markets?
Yeah. Then that's a very interesting question. Marketing is changing because consumer behavior and preferences are changing. It's the young consumers who are forcing marketeers to say that, guys, if you are not purpose driven, if your brands are not purpose driven, we won't buy you. And in a way, it's good because at the end of the day, it's the consumer who's the queen or king. And we can see this across markets. We can see it in varying degrees across markets. Some markets are more mature, but the similarities are very obvious. When you look at the kind of conversations on social media, when you look at the kind of conversations on some of the pages of the brand where you get feedback, you get consumer insights, it's very, very consistent. The fact that we need to revisit the way we create brands, or rather, we need to revisit the way we create products, and we need to build in a lot more care for the environment, for the society. Otherwise, we'll not buy you.
So, are we saying that they're moving to more minimalism and buying only when they require, or like going shopping and buying whatever amount of clothes that they could buy or skincare that they could buy?
So it's not minimalism. I think what we're looking at is a lot more consciousness. Then that consciousness could be about the local retailer. The consciousness could be about the amount of plastic that's used in a product, or the consciousness could be about the recyclability of what you buy. It's the attitude, and then it can manifest itself in any way.
So caring for the environment is good.
Caring for the environment and the sense of purpose, right? And environment is not just one aspect of it, right? It's a sense of purpose that the brand has, what is it that the brand stands for, right? Beyond the functional attributes.
So I was on I'm not sure you were logged in. We're attending our Ogilvy webinar yesterday evening, my time. And again, they were talking about purpose. And there was Anuj from Mondelez was talking about how in COVID, they went out of the way to help the local shopkeepers by getting people onto them. And they said it resonated well with Gen Z. Any comment on that?
So we did the same at Pluxee. So we have a direct relationship with our merchants in many countries where we reimburse them for the spends that our consumers do using their benefits products. So we did the same thing in many countries during COVID. We kept reimbursing them the same amount that we used to during the last few months, knowing that business would come back to normal, and of course we'll get paid back, or we'll settle with them. And that was very well appreciated, not just with the merchants but with the consumers as well, saying, okay, here is a company that's going beyond profits. Here's a company that is caring for the ecosystem and for the partners when they really need it.
Yeah, I mean, questions about ESG, where you're touching about this, and where again, there have been, while it's being talked about, and I think, but my question back to when we talked about Brazil and India, how does it play out when we're talking mass? When we're talking about people who are buying sachets and people who are buying milk in a pouch and not in a bottle, and which is not recyclable, that's still happening, and people are still buying that.
So that is a function of the purchasing power, and you can see that change. So, for example, today you're already seeing refillable pouches which you can fill in the bottles, right? Which in smaller packs. So that movement will take time because people need to reach a certain level of affordability. What's also happening in parallel is that you have consumer product brands who are making products more affordable for consumers while not compromising with the environment. So like I spoke before, once upon a time there had to be a choice between quality and care. And when I say care, it's care for social responsibility, it's care for the environment. Today some of the startups are doing it, even some large companies are doing it. They're breaking the barriers and giving consumers the ability to choose something which is good for the environment and is good for them.
Uh, Bhavi, question from you.
Okay. Since you already talked about how people are considering sustainability, I also feel that with sustainability ethics, AI is also coming into the picture where people are concerned how marketing and AI is going to go together. Like, as marketing gets more automated and data driven with AI, what's timeless leadership or storytelling principles do you believe that which will never go out of style?
Sure. I think the first point is that marketeers have to believe that AI is a powerful amplifier of human capabilities, right? And marketeers need to work with AI as a strategic partner, not a tool, which is what happens in many cases today. That's the first part. Second is that today AI is making everybody more efficient. AI is democratizing information, and not just information, but AI is democratizing insights, right? You leave AI to do a lot of your work, which means that marketeers can actually spend much more time using their brain power. I still remember 20 years back, we used to spend so much time looking at data, trying to generate meaningful insights out of them and then figure out what to do with them. Today we have a friend which is AI, right? And they can do that. So it's going to fundamentally shift the way we do marketing. And I just hope that more and more marketeers become friends with AI as a trusted advisor, then use it as a tool.
Absolutely. Sandeep, will you like to take it over?
Yep. So, on the similar note, how do you measure success in marketing today? Earlier when you were Unilever, Nielsen data comes in and you get a 0.2% market share up and there's a celebration and all. So how does the marketing change in today's age where Nielsen data maybe in some categories doesn't even cover more than 30% of the sales?
I think today a lot of it. So, firstly, the role of marketing has got far more intertwined with business, right? So, gone are the days when marketing was responsible for one aspect of business. Even in consumer product companies, the segregation between marketing and sales is much lower today than it was before. Right? Second is access to data and information is much faster. And the ability to process that data and information has increased so much that you're able to make many more advanced decisions, many more informed decisions. The third and another very important aspect is our ability to predict, because a lot of times data gives us lagging indicators versus using technology. Today we can predict if something has happened yesterday, what can I do today so that the outcome will be different tomorrow? And some of us do that every day in different parts of the world.
So, one on a
Great.
lighter note, I would just want
Bobby?
to know that if you were 22 again in 2025 and just starting your career, which platform or a content format would you choose first?
So interesting question, because today we are spoiled for choice. The first thing I would do is, what is it that resonates with me? So today, that's the choice which consumers are making. That's the choice which youngsters are making, saying, okay, if I'm working with a platform, does it comply with my standards of transparency and trust? Or does it comply with my standards of green quotient? So there are various aspects.
I would want to ask that I see young professionals today, they're chasing trends more than relevance. So, since you've worked with global brands, what should Gen Z learn about building relevance instead of chasing trends?
That's a very, very interesting question. So the biggest lesson working with global brands is that relevance is not about being trendy. It's about being useful. So for example, we have seen many Gen Z founders who are naturally good at spotting cultural moment, but the brands that last decades actually solve some fundamental human needs, right? So what are the fundamental human needs? We human need is to be connected with each other, security, convenience, status. Now these can be delivered by different categories or different brands, right? Again, closer to consumer products, for example, successful snack brands are not relevant because they chase food trends. They're relevant because they solve basic human needs like hunger or the desire for quick, affordable comfort food. That is timeless.
Absolutely. I consider this a major insight which today's generation should learn.
It's an interesting answer. It's a very interesting answer because my next question is linked to it. You worked for 20 odd years in global role, global company. We see a lot of people, Indians, marketers who go out, work for Unilever, work for Kraft, those things. But we don't see too many Indian brands which are truly even present in 40 countries as a brand. So that's something which, so of late, slightly long question, there's an Indonesian brand, Malkist, which is swept South Asia at least in terms of crackers. It's a cheese cracker which is sweet and salty, and they created a new category. We don't see Indian marketers actually going, and when I'm saying Indian brands, what stops Indian brands from going outside and creating something which is global in nature?
I think because the size of the Indian consumer market itself is so large, why would you want to chase market share elsewhere, right? Especially because your currency is not the strongest, and you have 1.4 billion consumers in India. So that's larger than continents or two continents put together in some cases, right? So why would you not focus, identify the right niche markets within India, right? And make it successful. For example, we always believe that India is not one country in terms of consumer markets, right? India could be 10 countries, India could be 15 countries. So think of India being a 15, think of any big, strong Indian brand being a 15 country brand. It's the same amount of population that you address in large parts of Europe, right? So I think it sometimes makes sense to focus on your core market, understanding your core consumers' needs, which might be coherent within that particular geographical definition that you've made. And I don't see a need for strong brands to venture elsewhere.
So you're saying there's nothing like a capability or attitude gap
Absolutely
rather
not.
than.
Absolutely not. Imagine trying to build a brand in France, Germany, UK. I'm talking of, let's say, Spain, between Western and Southern Europe. The combined population would be one region of India, right? In terms of the number of people, the addressable consumer market. So, why would you want to look at five different consumer insights and create communication, packaging, and campaigns in five different languages versus addressing the same consumer needs and insights in a more homogeneous population. I'm not saying that within India the population is homogeneous, but at least large parts of India will celebrate Diwali in the next few weeks, which is not the case here.
Great answer. So I not thought about it from that perspective.
As you said that we should focus on
Bhavi?
niche brands, as someone who will be entering marketing world soon, what skill should one be learning now that you believe that will matter more in next 3-5 years down the line?
I think the first one is to understand
Okay.
what is the fundamental need that I'm solving. Because a lot of times marketers go brand forward or product forward and not need forward, right? If you know what is the need you're solving, then that can be solved in different ways. And what is that aspect of need that you are solving with your brand or product, right? So that. Second is, of course, the complexity. For example, a lot of time people spend months on perfecting a product without realizing that there might be no consumers for it, right? You're so engrossed with your own creation that you don't take feedback, you don't ask people. I mean, you can be a revolutionary product person, but if you don't have the right insights and the right marketing behind it, it's not going to succeed.
Yeah, leads me to the next question. What do you think the way marketing is changing, as what things that a CMO or the qualities a CMO would need in, say, 2030, which were not that critical at 2020?
2030 is 5 years from now. And looking at the pace at which the world around us is changing, I think a lot will change. So, for example, I think in the next 5 years, marketeers will perhaps be as fluent in data as they are in creativity today. Because inherently, marketeers are creative. But today, because of the available tools at hand, I think the data fluency is increasing significantly. Second, I think marketeers are very quickly learning to work within ecosystem. So probably marketers could become orchestrators of ecosystems rather than orchestrators of campaigns. And last but not the least, there is a lot of convergence happening. So marketers should be able to own the entire customer cycle journey rather than just one part of it. But I think that the common thread is that there will be enough marketers who will be able to leverage AI to amplify human creativity and of course innovate.
From your experience, where does AI actually enhance creativity and where does it lack or fall short of?
So AI enhances creativity
Okay.
because it amplifies the inputs that you give. We must understand that it's a cause effect. It's Today there are lots of AI platforms who have started understanding personal emotional inputs. So if you are a regular user of any particular LLM platform, after a while that the platform knows what is it that you want, what is the tone that you want. It's the inputs which matter, right? And this has been the age old adage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So the human mind still prevails. So AI accelerates, AI amplifies, AI doesn't replace. It's like, I mean, if you if you pull back 100 years, 150 years, when machines were first introduced, there was a big concern that humans will get obsolete because machines will take over manufacturing. It happened in the manufacturing industry. But many more jobs have got created in the last 100 years, 150 years, which is the same with AI. So AI will liberate our mind to do things which we can do better, which is unleash human creativity, human emotion, and perhaps enable us to use more of our brain. Today, human beings don't use enough of their brains because they're preoccupied by things which are repetitive in nature, which probably technology can do.
Fresh perspective, I would definitely say.
Okay, great.
Sandeep, let's hear the next question.
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like uh, you're putting up an argument that there are not going to be any job losses at all, while the market is seeing slightly different perspective because there's, especially here, the creatives, there are lots of creatives who've been let go because it AI can do that job better than a copywriter is what some of the clients say. Means I don't agree with that. It's not because it does depend what you said quality of inputs. So if there's a senior guy who's a herself or himself a copywriter and puts those inputs, they might get better quality of inputs from AI, but I, to some extent, might not be able to, pick up that cue which only humans can.
Exactly. I mean, there have been umpteenth examples of creativity in advertising where there's been a tagline or there's been one insight which has been amplified by that creative director. And we've seen enough in India as well. I really doubt that AI can be that colloquial in their understanding. Yeah, AI can look at a brief and give you an excellent output, right? Can AI pick up that human nuance that lifts that creative content to the next level? At least at the moment, I doubt.
I mean, we do have AIs. We are using AI person. Did a quant research and we did on 5,000 people and we created AI personas based on the segmentation. So they do talk in English, but whether the personas can actually pick up the nuance and create creativity is still a question mark. But they are very creative. It's not it's a question of whether you want to take it or you say, look, I'll stick with the human being. But they're also quicker. It's much, much more efficient than having a copywriter who will take his own sweet time and write a copy.
Sure. It's just that to come up with this really basic human insights and convert that into something which is universally understood, that I think AI still has a journey there. I'm not saying maybe someday they won't be able to do it, but today when you really look at advertising, for example, since you gave the example of advertising, some of the biggest campaigns have had the most simple thoughts translated into an idea which is universally understandable, right? I mean, it transcends language barriers, it transcends cultural barriers. So I think that's one area where AI has a long, long way to go. And that's where the magic lies for truly creative professionals.
True, very true. So taking on a lighter note, so you handle a lot of teams from a lot of countries and you handle consumers of different countries. Which country has surprised you? Which country's consumers have surprised you the most?
Which countries' consumers have surprised? I mean, I think India continues to be an enigma because it's true, because the amount of exposure that an Indian consumer gets. I'll give an example. In most countries, communication is in one language. So in France, most communication is in French. In Brazil, most communication is in Portuguese. A typical Indian consumer processes communication in multiple languages. If you live in Mumbai, you see communication in Marathi, Gujarati, Hindi, English, and so on. And therefore, the ability of the mind to process that communication and therefore act in a certain way is very different. You may understand it, you may not understand it, and there are, of course, we know that India is multilingual. Indians are multilingual by nature, so the way they process communication, the way they behave is actually amazing. And I'm not saying because I'm an Indian, but it is true. I've seen that repeated number of times.
This is purely coincidental that Pujos are around the corner and you're saying that. Bobby, over to you.
Yeah, I would actually want to know, since you mentioned about India, and now that you know Indian audience, Indian consumers, and global audiences, if you think about the energy and the mindset, what is something that you feel is different in each country?
Yep. So today you can see this in. So there's a difference between countries who are still on the path of development, as we say, developed countries and relatively developing countries. You can see the difference. So, for example, in the developing markets, so India being an example, Brazil, Indonesia, and many others. So there is this inherent need to do more. What can I do more? What all can I do every day to reach a level which is higher than what my previous generations did? So it could be in terms of status, it could be in terms of money. There's a very different context there versus in a lot of developed markets, the mindset is more about how can I balance my work and life better. So it's a very, very distinct thing. So if you look at consumers or employees in some markets, they will always look for doing more, versus in some markets it's not that they don't do their jobs, they do their jobs well, but in their case they will look at how do I strike the right balance, how do I spend more time with my family, while I'm doing what I'm.
Just one follow-up question. Can you share a moment that really surprised you or inspired you seeing the young professionals globally?
Sure. I think it's the openness to change. So whenever there is a new concept that is introduced, or whenever there's a new technology that's introduced, today across countries you see young people who are open to change on one hand. On the other hand, they do process the information and they ask many more questions than youngsters used to do 20 years back. So they don't take things on face value. Right? They have their own minds, they will question, and there is a very strong sense of identity of what they like and what they don't like versus accepting things which other people like. So that's something which you can see across markets. So earlier, we always used to say that people like me buy things like this. Today, it's changing very, very quickly and saying, okay, so it's almost like personalization at a very mass level. Earlier, it was so massification versus personalization. Today, yes, there are trends, there are cultural contexts which are mass, but it's also adapted to every individual, and they question what's in it for them at an individual level.
Yeah, it's a very what left of the field kind of perspective. Very different. Very no, genuinely, it's uh, right brain perspective, not the left brain perspective. So, but he's a creative guy. You know. Uh, Coming to creativity, branding, and India, what we are seeing is a fairly complicated market because nobody consumes a 30-second any longer. And being I'm not stating the facts. Let's then say nobody consumes, but it's become more and more difficult to reach the right audience. How is it world over? Is it the same? Is it different? Is it to reach the 30 seconder or the 15 seconder or the TV? How is it changing in the rest of the world?
I think there are two ways of looking at it. One way is that short form content is extremely important, right? You've heard of too long didn't read, TLDR.
True.
So there is no patience in youngsters to read long content or watch long videos on one hand. On the other hand, if you catch their attention, then there is no 30 seconds anymore. Then it could be 5 minutes. And technology has enabled us to not pay through our nose to make somebody watch a 5 minute piece of content. But then that balance has to be struck, that how do you get the right attention? How do you have the right hooks in those 5 seconds or 10 seconds so that then you can make them watch the 5 minutes as well?
In the age of banner advertising and banner on different places, or YouTube or Instagram, how does one actually create a brand? How do you get across to people like her and say, look, this is what we stand for, and this is.
I think today some of the fundamental principles still remain the same. As long as we can answer the what's in it for me, for you, and for her individually. And today, technology allows us to do that at scale. So I can
Okay.
run a campaign where what you see is different from what she sees for the same brand or for the same product. And of course, what AI has enabled us is to real time calibrate the campaign. So if Bhavi is seeing something, I know whether she's interested in or not, and I can change something real time to make her interested. And if there's a call to action, I also know where does she click on a call to action button. Does she click if it's on top, if it's on the right, based her past behavior, right? So it's a mix of good old fundamental insights of creating the right value proposition addressed to each individual along with technology so that we can drive the kind
Okay.
of behavior that we want to among our consumers.
Great answers. So on a very lighter note, so a marketer today can't just call Ogilvy and depend on Ogilvy to create the brand for themselves. For them, they will have to work harder.
Absolutely. Well, the agency can still come up with some nice creative concepts, which can then be amplified using different media.
Bobby, over to you.
Basically, if you are advising a young marketer wanting to build a global brand from India, what two, three strategic imperatives would you emphasize now, and what pitfalls should they watch out for?
Okay. So, one is that the first one is, of course, there is a fundamental consumer insight which is very culturally relevant in different markets, right? So the cultural nuances are different. So One
Okay.
has to kind of address those cultural nuances. The second one is about letting go. When you have a concept for a brand, it could be a creative concept, it could be a product concept. A lot of times, those concepts don't work in other markets, and it could be either because the market is at a different maturity level, or because culturally they don't resonate with it, right? So what you can do is you can create some guardrails. For example, I give the example of the Happy Birthday song, the tune of the Happy Birthday song. You'll realize that in many countries, the tune of the
Yeah.
Happy Birthday song is the same, is the melody, but the lyrics change. So it's our ability to insist that you don't have to say it in English, Happy Birthday to you, versus you can say, like in French, Joyeux anniversaire, is the same tune. But you have to let go that this is what I created, so it has to be exactly like that, and so on. And I think the third one is to pick up the right feedback and signals from the ecosystem, because whenever there is a new input in any market, in today's day and age, in social media, and of course leveraging in AI, you get the feedback very quickly. So how, when you get feedback and if you need to make changes, how quickly do you make changes, could be the difference between success and failure.
Yeah, my last question for you in terms of when we are building a brand from India, how critical is the origin story for that?
So I think the origin story today is important when the origin story has a strong connect with the values of the brand or the theory of action, right? So if you build a brand from India where the Indian heritage lends credibility to the value proposition, absolutely. If you build a brand where it's an origin story, but people don't relate, let's say, India to that category or that story or the narrative, then I don't think it'll work. It's the same
Sure.
thing about it'll be like retrofitting something by saying it's Indian. So India has lots of, today, the amount of positive associations with India is extraordinary, right? So how do we then build those positive associations of India into the narrative is the question.
Great. Thank you. Any questions, Bobby?
One last question, that a piece of advice you would give out to all the marketers who's entering this industry.
You're talking of the young marketeers. So couple of things. One is that there's a lot of disruption happening today in the world around us, right? So the difference between success and failure will be the difference in how humble people are, how people listen, the ability to respond instead of react, and most importantly, a visible willingness to learn. So, and I always speak about humility because humility is a very powerful gesture, because it signals that you don't have all the answers. It opens the door for others to contribute. Right? So, it makes the whole team faster, adaptable. The second one is resilience. So, again, teams need resilience because things change every day, every week, every month, and and of course the willingness to learn, because resilience tells us the importance of learning, the fact that what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. And these three things are linked, right? Humility, resilience, and learning.
I would add one to it. Some of the startups don't always do, which Suvo did mention it before, but consumer closeness. If you do not know what the hell is your consumer thinking about your product or the category, then you can make Titanic and it will sink. So that's the.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any questions, any last suggestions, anything that you.
I think there is the point marketeers still following intuition, and I'm just touching upon the fact of AI trying to replace some jobs and so on, right? So there will be many moments where you will have lots of data to look at. And then it's the human intuition, it's the marketeer's intuition that will make you succeed versus giving that same input to a bot or an AI agent. I think
True.
that's what's going to continue to make the difference between human beings and machines.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much. I completely, it was a pleasure having you
Thank
over,
you.
Suvo. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Sure.
Bhavi.
You're most
Thank you. Thank you
welcome.
so
It
much for
was
joining and
great
sharing your
speaking to
insights.
both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.